They thought he was just another drifter. They thought they were keeping their neighborhood safe. But by the time they realized who he really was, it was too late. The man they tried to expose was already exposing something far bigger. The sirens had long faded, but their echo still pulsed in the back of Edward Cole's mind like a ticking clock. He stood alone beside his dusty van at the edge of the parking lot, the twilight casting long shadows across the faded asphalt. The crisp chill of the Georgia evening crept through the worn seams of his hoodie, but he didn't flinch. His eyes, focused, calculating, stayed fixed on the rearview mirror for a beat longer, ensuring the patrol cars were truly gone. It had been close, too close. Reaching into the van, Edward pulled out a black binder wrapped in a cracked leather strap and an encrypted tablet, the screen dark for now. The binder bore 3 scrawled words in faded red ink that looked hastily written. Operation. White line. He ran a thumb along the edge of the cover like it was the hilt of a weapon. This case was already dirty. Bodies found in cheap motels. Disappearances no one filed reports for. Surveillance glitches that weren't glitches. A human trafficking ring threading through sleepy southern towns, masked by supermarket shelves and false smiles. And now, thanks to a neighborhood busybody with a Wi-Fi connection and a TikTok account, everything could unravel in an instant. The video had gone viral overnight, 30 seconds of grainy, zoomed-in footage showing Edward in sweats, pacing in front of the store with a phone in hand. Suspicious behavior, she'd said in the caption. She left out the part where he showed his badge. Of course she did. The woman, neighbors called her Karen, hadn't just made a scene. She may have blown the lid off an undercover operation that took 2 years to build. Edward exhaled through his nose. Cold air fogged the glass of the passenger side window. He tapped the encrypted screen once. A digital lock clicked open, and the faces of 6 suspects flickered to life. Underneath each one, aliases, cash flows, and shipping manifests. The trail ran through 3 states, 6 phony warehouses, and ended right behind the frozen meat aisle of this exact supermarket. He was 3 days from completing the sting, 3 days from shutting it all down, and now they might know his face. Edward pulled out a burner phone and called the one number that still made his chest tighten slightly. It rang once, then a pause, then a click. "This line is secure," the voice on the other end said, calm, clipped, all business. "This is Cole. My cover's compromised. Civilian posted a video of me online yesterday. I still have a window, but I don't know how long it'll stay open." There was a pause on the line. Then, "What's your plan?" Edward's tone didn't waver. "I'm not backing off. Not yet. They still think I'm just a guy in a hoodie. Tomorrow I remind them what I actually am." That night, Edward didn't sleep. He stayed parked in a different lot, 3 miles out, rotating burner phones and checking surveillance threads. The dark circles under his eyes didn't dull the intensity in them, only sharpened it. The next morning, he didn't wear the hoodie. He wore a tailored charcoal gray suit, pressed and clean. His FBI badge hung from a leather holster, tucked under one arm, a federal arrest warrant, fresh from the Southern District. And behind him, rolling in quietly before dawn, were 4 black SUVs, engines off, windows tinted, doors tight, a ghost team, invisible to civilians. The sun wasn't up yet, but by 9:07 a.m., the world had changed. The first supermarket employee to spot him nearly dropped her clipboard. He wasn't the weird guy from the video anymore. He was someone else, someone important, someone real. Then the others saw them. 4 agents walking behind him in lockstep. 2 wore Kevlar. 2 carried locked briefcases. One tapped something into his earpiece as they passed the produce section. A shift manager tried to disappear into the back. He didn't make it. Two agents peeled off, intercepting him by the staff exit and pinning him gently but firmly against a wall. Edward didn't flinch. He kept walking. Straight past aisle 5. Straight past the place Karen had filmed him. Straight down the stairs into the basement. And there, behind what looked like an unused storeroom door, was the reason for the entire operation. A hidden digital suite, 8 monitors, surveillance feeds, laptop rigs, and 2 racks of external drives. On one monitor, what looked like DMV photos. On another, private social media accounts. In the corner, a rack of smartphones, labeled and categorized by Target ID. The room smelled faintly of bleach and burned coffee. The FBI agents didn't hesitate. They fanned out, photographing everything, bagging devices, speaking only in code. One of them turned to Edward. "This is bigger than we thought." "I know," he replied. Upstairs, customers continued shopping like nothing was happening, except one. Karen stood on the front steps of the store, holding her morning coffee, blinking in disbelief. She hadn't seen the black SUVs. She didn't recognize the man walking up the stairs as the one she filmed. He looked taller now, older, sharper. Edward stopped beside her. "Good morning," he said. She blinked. Yes, I saw you yesterday. I didn't know you were..." "A federal agent?" he offered gently. She fumbled. You were pacing. You didn't look like..." He raised a hand slightly, not to interrupt, but to quiet. "You didn't ask who I was," he said, his voice calm. "You didn't wait to see the badge. You just pulled out your phone. That choice? It could have gotten someone killed." Karen swallowed hard. "I didn't know." "No," Edward said. "You didn't." A silence hung between them, filled only by the soft sound of shopping carts rattling nearby. Then he turned to leave. Behind him, Karen stood frozen. And this time, nobody else in the neighborhood looked at him with suspicion. They looked at him the way people look at a storm that passed too close, like they suddenly understood how small they were, and how lucky. At exactly 9:07 a.m., the automatic doors of the supermarket slid open with a whisper, but what walked through them made the air crackle. Edward Cole entered first. Not the hoodie-wearing man from the viral video, not the suspicious figure filmed with a shaky hand and a neighborhood bias. Today, he wore authority like armor. Dark gray suit, crisp white shirt, narrow black tie. No sunglasses, no need to hide. The FBI badge on his belt caught the overhead light just long enough to silence the first whisper of gossip forming near the flower section. Behind him, 4 federal agents followed like a moving wall. 2 wore tactical vests. The other 2 carried reinforced briefcases filled with warrants, asset freezes, and encryption tools. They weren't here to ask questions. They were here to end things. Aisle by aisle, heads turned. Cashiers paused mid-scan. One of them, a kid barely 20, locked eyes with Edward, then dropped a bottle of water onto the conveyor belt. The plastic cracked loudly, but no one said a word. Not yet. In the back corner of the store, a shift supervisor named Troy McKenzie was staring at the security feed like it had betrayed him. He knew that face. Everyone did now. The man in the suit was the same guy Karen had uploaded yesterday, except today, he didn't look harmless. He looked like Judgment Day. Troy lunged for the back hallway, slamming his shoulder into the emergency exit. He didn't make it far. 2 agents were already there. They moved fast, efficient, controlled. In seconds, Troy was face down on the industrial carpet, wrists zip-tied behind his back, phone confiscated before it even lit up. "Target 1 secure," one of the agents confirmed in a low voice. Edward didn't pause. He kept walking, right past the freezer section, toward the employees-only staircase. He nodded once to the nearest cashier, just a teenage girl with her mouth open in shock, and slipped behind the swinging double doors. The basement was colder and dirtier. Stained tile, exposed pipes, a buzzing fluorescent light overhead that flickered like a broken heartbeat. The room labeled Inventory Overflow wasn't inventory at all. It was a bunker. Inside, racks of laptops, dusty cameras, tripods, Ethernet cords, Wi-Fi routers. Every wall was lined with hard drives. The air smelled like old plastic and guilt. Edward took a slow breath. He had seen worse, but not by much. One of the agents opened a server cabinet, revealing a mess of switches and blinking lights. "Live upload system," she murmured. "Looks like they're running a multi-node dark web relay, probably cycling IPs through Eastern Europe." "And the content?" Edward asked. She tapped a keyboard. A video thumbnail expanded on the screen. Even the most stoic agent in the room tensed. It was a face. Young. Terrified. "This is it," the agent said. "This is the route. Every file runs through here." They started moving fast. Cataloging, bagging, photographing every drive, every login sheet, every access code scrawled on post-it notes. One of the agents called upstairs. "Notify Cybercrime and Child Exploitation Division. We've confirmed transmission." Edward didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Upstairs, a second arrest was underway. A tall man in a manager's vest stood frozen beside the soda display, staring as two agents read him his rights. Customers were being escorted out quietly. The store was being shut down, not for a leak or an outage, but for a crime scene. And at the front door, Karen stood again. Only this time she wasn't holding her phone. She was holding a paper cup of coffee that trembled slightly in her hand. She watched as the manager, Mr. Givens, was led away in cuffs, watched as agents carried out computer towers and sealed evidence bags, watched as black SUVs idled at the curb like patient predators. And then Edward stepped out again. Same man, same face, but now the entire town was watching him with different eyes. Karen tried to form a sentence. Something. Anything. But Edward wasn't waiting. He stopped beside her once more, like life was giving her a second chance to understand the moment. "You know," he said, voice level, "before you call someone suspicious, it might help to ask who they are. Or better yet, what they're doing to protect people like you." Karen opened her mouth, but her voice cracked before sound could escape. "I'm not mad at you," Edward continued, "but I want you to understand something." He held up the arrest warrant, folded now, but unmistakably stamped with federal insignia. "Yesterday, you almost blew a case that took me 2 years to build, because you didn't like the way I looked standing in the cold." He looked her in the eyes, and for the first time, she looked away. "But here's the thing," he added. "You don't have to like how someone looks. You just have to think twice before turning them into a threat. Because sometimes, the person you call the cops on is the only one trying to stop the real danger." He turned then, stepping down toward the waiting SUVs, and just like that, the masks were off. Not just for Edward, for the whole town, because every neighbor, every manager, every bystander who'd ever made a snap judgment had to live with what they hadn't seen, or hadn't wanted to see. And Edward? He didn't wait for an apology. He didn't need one. Justice doesn't wait for recognition. It just shows up in a suit when no one expects it. The operation was over, but what it uncovered was just the beginning. You can shut down a trafficking ring in one morning. Changing a town's heart? That takes longer. 2 weeks later, the headlines finally caught up to what had already changed. FBI agent exposes human trafficking ring, hidden in DeKalb supermarket. Undercover sting saved dozens, locals stunned by scope. From suspicion to hero, who is Agent Edward Cole? The DeKalb Chronicle ran a full spread. Edward's photo was dead center, just above the fold. His face half-shadowed, standing beside a black SUV, hand on his hip, badge visible. Below it was a quote from the sheriff himself. Without his persistence and courage, we'd still be shopping for cereal over a crime scene. The public reaction was instant and complicated. Some people couldn't stop apologizing, flooding comment sections, group chats, and even the FBI's public relations inbox with words like shocked, sorry, and I never would have guessed. Others doubled down, of course. There were accusations of overreach. There were posts about, how come the government didn't tell us what was going on? The same people who once shared Karen's video were now sharing grainy mugshots of the men arrested in the sting, pretending they'd known all along. Karen didn't say much publicly. But people noticed she stopped hosting neighborhood watch meetings. Her videos vanished. So did the comments under the original post, deleted in shame or fear. Either way, silence can be its own confession. Meanwhile, Edward had already moved on. By the time the newspaper hit front steps across town, he was 3 counties away. Another town. Another badge number. Another burner phone ringing somewhere in the back of a different unmarked van. But that didn't mean he didn't feel it. Because when you work undercover, the job doesn't end with the arrest. The job stays with you, in the way people look at you or avoid looking, in the names you can't say, in the cases that almost blew up because someone with a phone thought they were helping. One night, Edward sat parked outside a gas station on the county line, flipping through his worn black notebook. On the first page, just below Operation White Line, he added a new line in sharp block letters. Remember what almost stopped you. Because it wasn't the traffickers. It wasn't the firewall. It wasn't even the risk of exposure. It was suspicion. Suspicion rooted in a hoodie, in skin, in the simple act of standing still with a phone. That night, he pulled out his encrypted tablet. The case files were locked up now, transferred. The drives were with forensics. The victims, those they had managed to identify, were receiving care and relocation support. But Edward wasn't looking at files anymore. He was reading a comment someone had left under the article. I used to work there. I thought it was just a storage room. I never asked. I didn't want to know. I'll never look away again. He stared at the words for a long time. Because that was the thing no one talked about. How easy it was to pretend you didn't see something. How often people assume normal is safe. But danger hides well. It hides behind uniforms and smiles. It hides in Employee of the Month photos and well-stocked shelves. It hides while the neighborhood is busy judging the wrong person. And the people who look suspicious? Sometimes they're the only ones fighting back. 1 month later, Edward stepped out of a quiet diner in Macon, Georgia. A different town. A different face in the mirror. But the same hoodie. He wore it intentionally now. As armor. A teenage boy stood outside the diner, staring at a cracked phone screen, watching something. Edward paused. What are you watching? He asked casually. The boy glanced up, Some guy who busted a human trafficking ring. Crazy story. Edward smiled faintly. Yeah? What made you click on it? The boy shrugged. Dunno. People thought he was just some dude being shady, but turns out... Turns out what? Edward prompted. The boy looked at him seriously. Turns out heroes don't always look like heroes. Edward gave a single nod, then walked away. No badge, no announcement. Just the quiet truth in a gray hoodie, stepping back into the shadows where the next mission waited. Because that's what real work looks like. It doesn't demand attention. It just demands you see what's really there.